Hey there, it's Chris from Good Roads. Those of you who have been with the channel for a while know that I have a long-running set of experiments around whether or not you can 3D print a skateboard mold. In my most recent experiment, I printed a two-part mold and I used it to press this deck right here. The graphic came out gorgeous, but the deck was one of the worst cases of delamination that I've ever had. Now, I'm not exactly sure what contributed to that delam. It was my first time using a paint roller to spread glue, and I only spread glue on one side of my veneers, which I've since learned is a big no-no. But because of the way I printed it, the surfaces of my mold were an open grid. It was something I did to try to save some plastic, but I'm wondering if that lack of surface area also contributed to the delam. So this week, I'm gonna try fixing up that mold and take another stab at pressing this deck. The first thing I want to try is skinning the open grid of the mold. I've got some spare birch skate veneers that I cut to the size of the mold, and I'm rolling glue onto them and onto the mold itself. Then I place the veneers into the mold halves and grab my spar press. I sandwiched some foam rubber scraps between the mold to account for the offset and started clamping everything down. And that's looking pretty good. Everything's meeting nicely and we've got some nice squeeze out. A day later, I cracked the press back open and it looks like my birch skin adhered to my molds just great. Using a razor, I trimmed the wood flush with the edge of the mold. But I'm not finished there. The original mold was designed with a pretty specific deck thickness in mind. Now that I've added the two birch veneers, those dimensions aren't gonna be as accurate as I planned. To make up for that, I'm gonna cover the birch in this adhesive-backed 1/4-inch foam rubber sheet. The foam will compress in the mold and help fill in any gaps resulting from the added offset from the veneers. Sheesh! That looks like some high-class Italian leather. We got a fancy upholstered mold on our hands. But this mold doesn't have to look pretty, it has to work. And to that end, I used some duct tape to make sure the foam was held tightly in place. I'm hoping too that the plastic-ish backing on the duct tape will also help prevent my blanks from getting glued to the mold. And with that taken care of, the only thing left to do is test drive. So I wetted out 7 plies of maple, rolling glue on both sides this time. Dropped them in the mold, and pressed. That looks promising. Let's give it a day to cure and then we can check the results. And here's the blank. It came out of the mold feeling a little damp, so I gave it a couple days to cure so that the moisture could evaporate, and now it's feeling good and solid. And I'm really hoping that this becomes the deck that I'm shooting for. I've addressed the two biggest reasons I can think of for why that delamination happened, so if this one still fails, I don't really know where to go from here. But I don't think it's going to. Ever since that first failure, I've had heaps more success using the foam roller to spread my glue, getting it done on both sides, and I've written a lot of really solid boards that I've made that way. In addition to that, I think the improvements that I made to the printed mold are gonna get it working just fine. And speaking of those improvements, if a skin on a printed mold is even required, and it might not be, this is just an experiment, there are easier ways to do it than the way that I showed in this video. Right within the print settings, you could just print a top layer on the mold, or you could do gradual infill to slowly step up from a mold that only has as much plastic as it needs to one that's a nice solid surface. Anyway, now I have the blank that I need to make my shape board, and you might remember that I also tried making a router template for this board shape, but I didn't have a router table. So next week I'm gonna be building one, along with some other accoutrements, which I hope will make a really awesome shaper station. If you wanna see how that goes down, along with all the other awesome DIY board sports stuff that I get up to here on the channel, you're just gonna have to hit that subscribe button. If you got questions or comments, leave them down below. If you dig the content and wanna support, you can join these awesome folks right here and pitch in a little on Patreon. Those contributions help keep the shop flush with materials and allow me to keep making cool stuff to show you guys every week. It really does help out and it means the world to me, so thank you so much. That's gonna be it for this one. As always, I love having you guys along for the ride. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Ooh, it's so soft because of the rubber. Oh boy. That's gonna be it for this one. Oof, it's heavy, dude. That's a lot of torque.